This video was made possible thanks to CuriosityStream. Watch TLDR ad-free and get exclusive videos from us by signing up to the CuriosityStream Nebula bundle deal at curiositystream.com/TLDR Global. With us nearly 2 weeks into the Ukrainian invasion in Ukraine, we can see very clearly the lengths that Putin will go to in order to try and cement his legacy. We've seen maternity wards hit with Putin's bombs. We've seen civilian areas consistently targeted. And we've seen civilians who have lined up to protect their cities and families brutally killed. While the West have said that they support Ukraine and have offered refuge to asylum seekers, have imposed huge sanctions on Russia, and even provided Ukraine with weapons, they still haven't yet done one of the main things that Zelenskyy has asked for: impose a no-fly zone. But who else is asking for this? Do the public support it? And is there precedent for such a move? Well, let's take a look at that right now. Before we begin, only about a quarter of you are subscribed thus far. So if you want to make sure you don't miss any updates at this very important time, then be sure to subscribe. Thanks for your support. First things first, what actually is a no-fly zone? At its core, a no-fly zone is a region of airspace where certain aircraft cannot fly. There are, however, a few different flavors of no-fly zones. For instance, sometimes a no-fly zone will refer solely to military aircraft. While fighter jets, for instance, will be blocked from entering these areas, civil aviation and the likes of passenger jets will be allowed to travel as normal. Other times, though, a no-fly zone will be absolute, meaning that no aircraft, military, civil, or otherwise, can enter the airspace. No-fly zones tend to refer to restricted airspace due to a military conflict, but that's not the only reason for restricted airspace. Most countries impose de facto no-fly zones around high-security areas or major events. For instance, in the UK, the Sellafield nuclear site, Houses of Parliament, and Downing Street all have restricted airspace above them on a permanent basis. And during the 2012 London Olympic Games, a no-fly zone was established in the airspace around the sporting venues, given the presence of high-profile dignitaries. The US have similar areas too. Area 51, the Capitol, and the White House are all permanent prohibited areas. There are generally 3 lawful ways of setting up a no-fly zone: an authorization from the UN Security Council, setting up a no-fly zone on the principle of individual or collective self-defense, or setting it up with the consent of the relevant state. Crucially, a no-fly zone can't just be set up on paper though. You need to set up surveillance systems and aircraft to monitor the airspace, and then ultimately stop any aircraft from contravening the no-fly zone. In other words, shooting down the contravening aircraft. And this is where problems for a no-fly zone in Ukraine develop. While in theory establishing a no-fly zone over Ukraine would prevent Russia from carrying out its bombing campaigns, it would also require NATO forces to shoot down any Russian aircraft contravening the hypothetical no-fly zone. Such a move would arguably give Putin legitimate reason to strike back, i.e., give Putin legitimate reason to target a NATO member state or its aircraft. Then, under the terms of NATO Article 5, which says that an attack on one would constitute an attack on all, ultimately the entirety of NATO would end up being dragged into the conflict. NATO's Supreme Allied Commander from 2013 to 2016 highlighted how introducing a no-fly zone is tantamount to war. If we're going to declare a no-fly zone, we'd have to take down the enemy's capability to fire and affect our no-fly zone. NATO's current Secretary General has stressed that while NATO understands the desperation, we also believe that if we did establish a no-fly zone, we would end up with something which could lead to a full-fledged war in Europe, involving much more countries. Beyond just the issue of creating an all-out war, a no-fly zone over Ukraine might not actually stop Russia's bombing campaign. While an enforced no-fly zone would indeed stop Russia's assault from the air, it wouldn't stop land or sea-based missiles from being fired. The RAF's former commander of operations highlighted that in a no-fly zone, aircraft can find themselves owning the skies but merely able to watch as the enemy ground troops operate below with impunity. And to be fair, so far, Russia's air force seems to have been conspicuously absent. US intelligence still reckons that Ukraine has control over its airspace, which is why it's been able to use drones so effectively against Russia's ground forces. In any case, no-fly zones have only been used on relatively few occasions. There's 3 main cases you can take a look at, and in all 3 instances, the coalition enforcing the no-fly zone has complete air superiority. In fact, when it comes to the Iraqi no-fly zone from the 2000s, despite the fact that Saddam Hussein offered a $14,000 reward to anyone who could shoot down a coalition plane, no manned aircraft were ever shot down in Iraq. Only 1 NATO plane was shut down during the Bosnian no-fly zone, and in Libya, no NATO planes were down during the no-fly zone, despite the fact that Gaddafi possessed a vast arsenal of anti-air weapons. But we can't assume the same thing will happen this time. On paper at least, Russia has impressive air and anti-air capabilities, far greater than those of Iraq, the Bosnian Serbs, or Libya. Therefore, enforcing a no-fly zone over Ukraine will be far more difficult than the previous examples we have of this technique being used, and therefore it's far more likely that we'd see casualties or direct conflict between NATO and Russian troops. Ultimately, the West is in a difficult spot, trying to respond appropriately, but not overreact and provoke Putin further. That's an issue when it comes to military conflicts like this, but also economics. This conflict has hit Russia's economy hard, but the West is also incentivized to end things quickly to limit the economic hit on a global scale. In fact, we discussed the expected impact on the global economy in another video, one that's available exclusively on Nebula. The streaming service my creator friends and I have teamed up to build, where we don't need to worry about demonetization or the algorithm. Over there you can find all of our latest videos ad-free, and we've also got a bunch of content available exclusively on Nebula, which will never come to YouTube. It's not just us either. All of our favourite educational creators are already there, like Wendover Productions, Real Life Law, Polymatter, Legal Eagle, Half as Interesting, and many others. But wait, we said this video was brought to you by CuriosityStream, right? Well, as a platform full of the best documentaries online, they naturally love educational creators like us. As such, we worked out a deal whereby if you sign up to CuriosityStream using the link in the description, you'll also get free access to Nebula. And that's not a free trial either. You'll get access as long as you're a member. To make things even better, for a limited time, they're offering a deal where you can get 26% off their already low price, making an entire year of both services less than $15. Less than $15 a year for all of your favorite educational creators, as well as superb documentaries on CuriosityStream. Signing up at curiositystream.com/TLDR-EU or clicking the link below not only gets you the deal, but it also directly supports TLDR and other educational content creators on the platform, as well as getting you original content and an ad-free experience.